The Powkiddy RGB20 Pro is one of the most unique retro handhelds I've seen in a while. A retro game handheld that manages to stand out in an ever-growing ocean of retro handhelds thanks to its unique cyberpunk-looking design. However, can the RGB20 Pro impress beyond its clever looks? Or does it keep Powkiddy stuck in third place against Anbernic and Retroid? I've been using the Powkiddy RGB20 Pro exclusively as my #1 console for the past week to answer these questions, and this is what happened. When I first opened up the Powkiddy RGB20 Pro, I was really pleased to see that it met my expectations in terms of visual design. Sometimes we see products online, but in person they don't look as impressive. The narrow Game Boy look with an industrial yellow design and revealed circuit board really do make the Powkiddy RGB20 Pro stand out. However, when I picked up the Pro, I wasn't as impressed. The whole front of the console is covered in a hard clear plastic that is reminiscent of some of the cheap plastic shells you could get for the PSP. The kind of plastic that feels a bit thick and cheap. The controls and screen aren't affected, but the overall quality of the console feels like it takes a step down. I understand that the open view ports of the console need this kind of clear plastic to see through. However, I feel like it could have been used in just those areas, and the rest of the yellow or whatever colour you choose could be that more premium matte feeling plastic. Moving on and not letting things get too distracted by the clear plastic shell, the RGB20 Pro still looks unique and interesting as a retro handheld. And I'm finding this more and more important these days. As I keep saying, with so many retro handhelds available in the market these days, it's hard to stand out. One of the few ways to do that, as superficial as it is through looks. And I'm finding myself becoming more and more susceptible to that aspect of a console these days. The RGB20 Pro is interesting to look at, to the point where it always catches your attention and makes you want to pick it up. That alone makes a huge difference to how many times I find myself wanting to play the RGB20 Pro and enjoying carrying it around with me. Knowing that the RGB20 Pro is aimed at the generations of PS1 and some PSP capabilities, I decided to focus on PS1 gaming. One of my favourite games from the PS1 generation was the first Medal of Honor game. I always remember that it came out of nowhere. A World War II FPS with spy stealth aspects not too dissimilar to GoldenEye sounded like an absolute dream to me, and I was not disappointed at all. Picking up Medal of Honor around November is one of the influences in me enjoying games with strong spy or stealth aspects in the winter months. And so firing it up on the RGB20 Pro at this time of year is just perfect. And once again, I wasn't disappointed. Of course, Medal of Honor was going to live up to the memories, but the Powkiddy does a fantastic job of creating PS1 immersion, giving you a lovely screen and all the controls you need in a fun and exciting form factor. I've said it before and I'll say it again, I'm finding myself drawn more and more to vertical ergonomics these days for PS1 handheld gaming. There's something that just feels right about it. One of the things that did frustrate me though was the omission of an obvious menu button. When it comes to emulation, we always need to access the emulation menu at some point, whether it's for using save states, changing aspect ratios, or just exiting a certain game. But for some reason, Powkiddy don't seem to like to take the easy option of just adding a menu button. Instead going for a hotkey kind of system, basically pressing two buttons together to get access to different functionality. In the case of the RGB20 Pro, it's hold select and another button, for example X, to get access to the menu. In the end, you get to the same point, but it just feels a bit more laboured than needed. A quality of life improvement that I think Powkiddy really should focus on. While I'm moaning, I also think that the sleep functionality is not the best. It kind of works as intended, but seems to lose more battery than I would expect while it's in sleep mode. Sleep mode really baffles me on retro handhelds. It seems to be such a mixed bag of performance from handheld to handheld, even from the same manufacturers sometimes. I feel like by this point, isn't there a well-known way to implement sleep mode that is just universal? I guess not. Back to the positives though, and the RGB20 Pro really does stand out as a vertical handheld from all the competition, and it's not just because of its looks. It's that it feels narrower and taller than the competition. This makes it feel different but comfortable in your hands and brilliantly pocketable, lending itself more to mobile phone proportions than a usual vertical handheld. The tall and slim design actually reminds me a lot of this Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle handheld I had as a kid. You know, those like LCD screen ones. I think I had a Top Gun one too. I always found those consoles looked really unique and were great to hold. To add to the portability aspects of the RGB20 Pro, the clear plastic front covering, although it has its downsides in terms of look and tactile feeling, really adds to a sense of durability that is above any other retro handheld I've used in a while. The industrial looks of the RGB20 Pro extend to its feeling, and it really feels like this Powkiddy could survive a decent drop or two. Having had an absolute blast reliving some of my Medal of Honor memories, I decided to see how much I could push the RGB20 Pro. Moving on to PSP emulation with some Spider-Man 2. Initially, I wasn't expecting a whole lot out of PSP emulation. PSP always seems to be the console that the more budget options add into the emulation list to sound impressive, but often can't really handle the task. This is usually indicated by the carefully selected PSP ROMs that are added in. Basically lightweight games as opposed to some more of the heavyweight options that will really test the emulation. However, when playing through Spider-Man 2, I was really impressed. To totally nitpick, there were a couple of moments of minor stutter, but hardly anything that takes away from the overall experience. Next up, I tried some Dragon Ball Z on the PSP, and this was absolutely brilliant. The Powkiddy was handling the gorgeous Dragon Ball Z visuals with no problem. This game looks so good actually that my kids promptly took notice, and I just had to let them have a go. And this is what I love about these retro handhelds. It's my kids being able to notice in passing some of the awesome games I used to enjoy from the past and take an interest. I've tried so many times to set up the perfect situation to get my kids to appreciate retro games, but it never truly works. But the natural and unforced nature of enjoying a handheld while chilling on the couch makes for those perfect opportunities to share these amazing experiences together. And it's helped even more when the console itself looks as unique and interesting as the RGB20 Pro does. To the point where my wife and kids actually started calling it C3PO. Over the course of the week, I've had mixed emotions with the Powkiddy RGB20 Pro. From moments of pure gaming bliss to moments of unnecessary frustration. You see, this is the thing about Powkiddy in general. I feel like Retroid and Anbernic have set themselves as the clear top two in the affordable retro handheld environment. Both doing their own thing and both capable of holding the top spot depending on what you're looking for. Kinda like the Xbox versus PlayStation battle from back in the day. But I feel like Powkiddy has a real chance to be that third competitor. Almost like the Nintendo of the group. Focusing on more unique and affordable or budget ideas than Retroid or Anbernic. But I feel like Powkiddy is still finding their voice. When I pick up a Retroid these days, I know what I'm going to get. When I pick up an Anbernic, I know what I'm going to get. But when I pick up a Powkiddy, I'm not so sure. But that's an overall comment for Powkiddy, as I really want them to carve out that third option in their own iconic way. And a console like the RGB20 Pro is a great example of that. Sure, I've had a couple of gripes with it, a design choice that has a positive and a negative to it, and some easy functionality improvements. But overall, I've had an absolutely brilliant time with the RGB20 Pro. It handles its emulation brilliantly, and is so much fun to carry around with you. Even now, right in this video, a couple of weeks after using the RGB20 Pro and having moved on to another console, I find myself thinking about the Pro and wanting to pick it up. A fun and very unique console. If you want to check out a similarly unique and fun, but more powerful retro handheld, then check out this video right here.